involved, or I should just talk about a little bit about Star Wars and being involved in Star Wars and how it happened? Which one do you want to start with?
Why don't you start with how you were involved first?
See, you asked the question. There you go. I was working, just to go back to a little bit of history here, I had the opportunity to go to England and work in England in 1974. And I was doing a TV series called Anne of Avonlea, which was a BBC TV series, which was a sequel to the Anne of Green Gables series that they'd already done. I was playing a character called Roy Gardner. And from that series, I think I arrived there, I guess it was in January, and they filmed in, I guess we filmed through into probably May. From that series, I got the opportunity to meet a casting director by the name of Irene Lamb, and she was casting a movie called The Eagle Has Landed. And that was a story of how the Germans during the Second World War had sent a mission into the coast of England to try and either assassinate or capture Winston Churchill. Went crazy mission, but that's basically apparently what the story. That was what the idea of what the story is based on. It's from Jack Higgins' novel, and so when Irene had cast that movie, it wasn't long after that George Lucas started the preparation in 1975. I guess it was as early as that. 75, late into 76, the preparation for Star Wars. And they had already set up at that time to take Star Wars to film it in North Africa and film it, use the studios, Elstree Studios in England, which is in the north of London. So basically what had happened is I got called in to meet with George Lucas, and through Irene Lamb, who was a casting director who already knew my work. So I went in to meet George, and we met a couple of times. It was in an office in 20th Century Fox building in Soho Square, which is really where the film community is based in London. And we basically chatted. We didn't do, I didn't have to do really any scene readings or anything like that, but we just talked. I talked about my background and what I was interested in doing and some of the people I'd worked with in that. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call, or my agent got a call from Irene Lamb and said that George would like you to play this particular character in the movie Star Wars. And nobody knew anything about Star Wars. It was very hush-hush, and nobody really knew George Lucas's work at the time. I had had the opportunity, though, to see American Graffiti. So I knew a little bit about it, because American Graffiti had not been released in the UK. Sorry. I'm supposed to shoot a music video on Tuesday, so I'm getting this text message. Oh, we wanted this. Let's ignore that. So, what had happened was, I was originally cast to play a character called Fixer. And Fixer is in the original screenplay, it's in the comics, and I think it's also mentioned in the book. Fixer's a character who runs Tosche Station. And in the movie you hear this dialogue where Uncle Owen says to Luke, he says, you can't go over to Tosche Station about the power converters and that. And Fixer was a mechanic that repairs things, so he repairs power converters and that. Tosche Stations is like a hangout where the kids would hang out and play, kind of video games at that time. And he was one of Luke's friends. In the storyline, they would do sand surfing together and things like that. So the Fixer had a girlfriend by the name of Cammy, and the other characters in there was Windy, and there was also a character called Bridget Biggs, which you do see in the movie. And in the history of the backstory, Biggs had gone off to the academy, and at this moment in time, he's returning back he's coming back to see his friends and tell them about what's going on. And he tells Luke about what's going on in the Rebel Alliance, with the Rebels and with the Empire, and the battle is taking place. And Luke is excited by this because he wants to join and he wants to go to the academy. And so there's a moment where you see there's these power lenses that you're looking up at the battle that's taking place in the galaxy. And so Fixer's character was not really, I always thought Fixer was not really interested because he was probably the only guy he had the only girlfriend around there for about a couple 100 miles, so why would he go and fight a battle? He didn't need to go and fight anything. But Fixer wasn't used. But we went out to Tunisia, we filmed all the sequences, some of them are on YouTube now, and I guess the irony with Fixer is Hasbro this year are making a toy of that character that's not even in the movie. So that's down to fans asking for it, interested in these all of the ancillary characters that are to do with Star Wars. So we're in Tunisia, and we were staying in a place called Jerba, and a hotel. This is, I believe, in April. If I remember, it was in April, and when you're filming various sequences on location, you'll be called in, or you'll be taken to over to where the filming is going to take. We were in North Africa, in Tunisia, and you're taken to that location, or you fly in and you stay in the hotel and you're waiting to shoot. So I probably had about a 3-day wait before the scenes for Fixer were going to actually be filmed. And there were sequences that were to be done in Tunisia, North Africa, and there were sequences of the Fixer's character that were to be done at Elstree Studios, where all the interiors of Tashi Station were being built and going to be filmed. So lo and behold, I'm waiting at the hotel for these days to pass, and Robert Watts comes back to the hotel to get me to say, George wants to see you on location on the set. And I knew my schedule was not due for days, so I thought, oh, that's great, I haven't shot anything and I'm being fired. So I got to the set, I got to the location, and George, as I got out of the car, George was walking to me, and he had a script in his hand. And he comes up to me and he said, can you do me a favor? And I said, what is it? And he said, can you play this scene with Alec Guinness? And no one will know, it won't affect you playing Fixer, because you're going to be wearing this stormtrooper costume and you'll have a helmet on. But I need you to play this scene with Alec Guinness, because there's dialogue involved, and Alec Guinness, who's playing Obi-Wan, would like somebody to actually perform the scene with him. So I looked at George and said, sure, let's do it. And so he handed me his screenplay, and I started reading the scene, because I hadn't I'd read the screenplay, but I hadn't really analyzed the scene. And so as I was walking towards where they were actually set up the cameras and where the land screen was, they had started dressing me. So I was trying to look at the script, and they had already started taking my clothes and putting the stormtrooper costume on, because they were ready to shoot. They were all waiting for me to arrive. And so had I said no, I don't know what would have happened. But anyways, I said yes, and we went ahead and they dressed me. And I'd never really seen the stormtrooper costume from another perspective. I hadn't seen anybody else wearing it yet, really. So as I was putting it on, I wasn't even too sure what they were putting on. But as I was getting dressed, there was a pair of the boots in that they had were not. First of all, there's no articulation in the leg. You couldn't really bend your knee with the way the plastic was. And so the back plate on mine would keep falling off. So they duct taped the back of my legs in order to keep the costume on. It's true. And they do that in film because it's really for camera, it's not supposed to be used to run around in it and play all day and have fun. It's really just for camera. So we got to the set, or when we actually got to set it up. That was the moment that I had not met Alec Guinness before that moment, and so I got introduced to him and we chatted a bit and then we started running through the scene. And I think we had a couple of run-throughs, and they shoot it from different angles. I think they shot it from about 3 different angles. And it's one of those unusual things that by saying I'll do a favor for George, and what happens, the scene becomes a very famous scene, and it became, as a lot of people say, it became an iconic moment in all of the Star Wars movies. And it's very interesting to have a scene that you do, because I've done a number of other films, to have a scene that you do and everybody knows your lines. I mean, that's kind of a very special thing to have in cinema history. So that was really how that happened. It was as simple as that. I think we took probably about 3 hours, maybe a little bit more, to shoot all of that whole sequence. And then we moved on, and that went off, and then I moved on and we did the Fixer scenes. So that's kind of like, it's as simple as it is. That's how it works. Filming, I mean, one thing about Star Wars, when we were filming on location, it didn't feel like a big Hollywood movie. It felt much more like an independent movie, because there wasn't like 20 trailers or anything like that. It was just it was a smaller crew when you're filming on location, especially at that time. And also there weren't all these studio executives running around. There wasn't a lot of extra bodies, as I say, standing around doing nothing. Everybody who was there was pretty much working.
Tell us about when you filmed the Fixer scenes.
Yeah, the fixer scenes, those were as is with the scenes in Mos Eisley at the spaceport. Those buildings actually exist, and you can still go back today to Tunisia and you can see those buildings are still there. What they did is they dressed them up with some interesting looking objects to make it look a little more, to make it more science fiction. But those buildings exist and people do take tours, and apparently somebody said that in Uncle Owen's place where they filmed the Uncle Owen sequence, occasionally nomadic people come and sleep there and then move on. So it's an interesting part of the world. When we're doing the fixer sequence, we filmed the outside scenes, which was on a very large building, which again existed, and it's just like an unusual structure that's near the location of where Mos Eisley is, and that became Tashi Station. And there's like a small doorway that was on one of those buildings, and they replicated that doorway in the studios back in Elstree in England, and then they created all the interior for what is Tashi Station, and that you can see, as I said, you can see some of those clips on YouTube. And the interior of Tashi Station was really like a clubhouse in atmosphere. So there you go. Questions?
Yes. My first question is,
yeah.
So you filmed these scenes, now how long did it take you to film the scenes for Fixer, and when did you find out that they were going to be cut?
Right, Fixer's scenes were, I guess we filmed that in about a day and a half. Yeah, I can't remember exactly because there's moments in the Fixer in that sequence, for instance, there's quite a lot of dialogue between Biggs and Luke. And this is all dialogue that is explaining what has happened with the Empire and what has gone on. And I think maybe that's why those scenes weren't used, because those scenes, even though they talk, with dialogue, they're talking about the same thing that's basically happening out in space. And the problem with that is the fact that if you're going to see it, you don't need to talk about it, because the audience is going to pick up on it anyways. So I think there was a feeling that there was so much dialogue going on, it slowed the sequences down. Biggs does appear later on in the film in the battle sequences, it's when in Starfighter. But the other Fixer sequences in England we shot, I think probably that was again about another day, 2 days.